introduce themselves and give us a little bit of business, and then we're going to get into what our learning experience is all about.
Thanks everyone, really nice to have you here. I hope all you Zoom people can hear. Can we have a wee thumbs up for the ones that we can see? Are you doing okay with the volume? Thank you. Sorry, this is very much an amateur setup. It's a mediocre to a down. If I talk loudly, can you hear me a wee bit better? Because I'm quite happy to shout at you all. Yeah. Sorry, very much as an amateur setup. There's been no tech services employed in this, so thank you for giving it a go, and we'll do the best that we can to talk as loudly as we can so you can hear. We can also hear you, so if you want to unmute yourself to jump in the conversation, you are up nice and loud and the whole group can hear you. So please feel free to be part of the room. We have, what you can't see is that we have you up on a large TV screen on the table, and we have 4 wonderful faces all in front of us all. So if you wave, the group will wave back to you, although if Tessa turns the camera over. We've got a two camera setup happening here. So you've got the camera here that's facing to us as the panelists, and there you have the room, so everyone can wave and you can feel part of it. So please don't hesitate to join in, to unmute, button, ask questions. It's certainly what Erica and I want. We don't want to be the only voices that are happening around here and take those for your advice. The downside is they don't get beer and pizza, which is just as well, because we would run out of pizza. And don't feel bad, you guys online, because we haven't got enough for you. So there's a few bits. There's a few bits. So I'm Kim Dovey from SkillPod and Smart Work Creator. I got asked today how long, just before how long I've been in business. I'm not going to tell you because it's way too many years, and I've earned every single one of the great years. We started off as, well actually the royal we, I started off as a book designer when I was pregnant with my first child. He's now 20 or something, and it was just as email and internet was coming in, and I did it because I didn't have time, because I had 3 other older children to be running around all the time, and email was just coming in, but we were still using couriers. So I started off doing book design because they were large projects that I could design without having to move around a lot. Over the years, that was in Christchurch. Over the years, life has happened. I mean, I think we're all very aware of how life has happened in 2020. For Christchurch, that been happening for a decade, and with the earthquakes. And from that, publishing changed, and as books were becoming ebooks, iPads and touch screens were coming into play, we started moving into online content and looking at what we could do to offer services to publishers. Little did we know that they didn't want them. So they weren't interested because they were all being driven by their big overseas buddies. Publishers really look like dinosaurs. Very, very similar. Really large big corporates that move very slowly. Very intermediate, very, not very, you can't go very far into the complex to get lots of money when you've got little things. So we found that quite difficult. So we looked at the skills we had and we pivoted into the wonderful corporate lollipop that we had sitting here in downtown Auckland. And so we pivoted into online training and what it looked like to do learning design. And we we have a real inner passion for creating learning experiences that hook people in. And so on the screen, there is just you and the screen. That's it. There's no one else to drive you. And content plays a really large part of that journey. So that's where we have our wonderful Erica, who, should I say your background? Yes, please. Okay. Erica's background is in education. She started off as a teacher and totally helped move schools into the online space before she got sick of the dinosaurs in schools and moved into HR. So the blend of an education background and an HR background in online training is for us gold, and we're very, very lucky to have her as part of our team. So Erica is our instructional designer. She's project managed and writes all the training, and she's actually going to do most of the talking tonight and and give you why. Yeah.
Thank you. I started my journey when I was 20 at the Auckland Art Gallery. As a docent there, I would take tour groups around to talk about artwork So I got used to talking to very, very littles, from kindergarten all the way up to very, very big, senior citizens, delivering the same message over and over, but to a different audience. I spent 20 years as a high school art and art history teacher. And within that time, I was also a lecturer at AUT, teaching teachers how to teach. So thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to geek out again, because I absolutely love the ideas around education and why people learn and how you get the best out of people while they're learning. So thank you for that. And I'm apologising now if I get up and start walking around. That was kind of how I used to lecture. So it might just become a reflex and I'm up and I'm not running around. One of the things that I think is really important to understand about everything that we do is we are talking to a learner miles away. We never get to meet them. We never get to interact with them. But we have to try and meet them where they are in a sense. So everything we do, right down to where a button goes in a module and whether it is a button or whether it's an autoplay, is done with the learner in mind. So hopefully some of the theories that we'll talk about tonight will explain that a little bit more. And if you've got any questions, or if I'm not making sense, or if I'm getting too passionate, or I've wandered off out the stairs, feel free to ask any questions or pull me back to earth, please. I just
and that's you know, that's where we can kind of relate, is that, you know, we are dealing with people we don't know, we don't see, and trying to make decisions about whether they want to last in the show play, or you know, how they want to perform, or so. You know, I think there's some things that we can learn from it.
The name we use is using a customer.
Yeah.
So
you've got that
using a customer. Yeah. If you guys are used to using a customer, then learner is teacher, the same thing. But you know, we're not really going to see how they know it's great. What similarities there are.
Yeah. So the first question we have, how do you use adult learning theory or techniques to get people engaged with your content right from the very beginning? And can you show us some examples?
Certainly can show you some examples, some we've heard earlier. So everything we do is a collaboration between our clients, myself as the instructional designer, but also the graphic designers that we've got on board. And it's a collaboration because we're not the experts in the content. We are the experts in getting that content across to the people that you need it to go to. So we rely very heavily on a really good relationship between ourselves and the client, and that's based on trust. And trust is established by knowing what you're talking about. And that's where we come in. So the first thing that happens is we meet with clients, we talk about the needs that they have as a business, the needs and the pain points that they have with the learners or their staff or whoever it is that they're trying to reach. And then from there we start talking about where they want to go with the learner. Where does the learner need to be by the end of that journey, and how long is that journey needing to be? So that's where we start coming in with the andragogy, which is the adult equivalent of pedagogy, which is the theory of how somebody learns. So andragogy deals specifically with how adults learn. And adults learn very differently from children. You'll often find with adults there's a lot more resistance to that learning. You need to be really, really clear, and you need to be really, really, I'm going to say forceful, strong, with the why. Okay? You need to get that buy-in right from the start. So we've got some examples tonight to show you some of the theories that we use. I've picked out about 6 or 7 of the main theories that we use, and the clients that we've used, that we've applied those theories to. So the first 2 that we've got here is for Toyota, who you'll be familiar with, of course. Toyota are moving from a service model to a hospitality model, which is a really interesting idea. They're going from this idea of you coming onto the lot, you need a car, I've got cars, let's meet in the middle, to you're coming onto the lot, you're a human being, you're very different from me, your needs are different from mine. You know, I don't know how many children you've got, if you've got children, do you have skiing weekends, that sort of stuff. So they're wanting to move more to a bespoke experience where you come in and you feel like you are special, like you are actually somebody who matters to me. I may never see you again, but if I do a good job, I will see you again because you're going to come back to me. So to do that, we've got two theories here. We've got constructivist, and for those of you that aren't wearing your glasses, which basically means knowledge is constructed by an individual's experience. So to explain that, I've got two examples underneath. Peter believes that fire is dangerous because he's burned his hands, whereas Paul believes that fire is a good thing because it keeps him warm. It's still fire, but your experiences construct how you relate to that fire. That applies to the modules that we built to explain what hospitality is and how it's beneficial to you as a business and what it means to you as a team. And then we follow that up with behaviorist, which is where learning is a change of behaviors and the environment that the learning takes place in should encourage that change. So you're learning on site at the car lot, and that environment should reflect the behaviors that we're now wanting you to do. So how does your car lot create that inviting atmosphere for the people that walk in? How do you make your guests, because they're not customers now, they're guests, feel welcome and special? So Tessa, if you could, Tessa's our button. So one of the things that we did start this off was to build on that idea that we've had experiences of turning up to somebody's place and trying to build upon those individual experiences to create a single message. Now, you're all sitting there very, very relaxed. You're very inert. You're not interactive with what we're talking about anyway, for us, that's going to change. Right, so we want you engaged in this, and that's the whole key for our online training, is that we don't want people to sit there inertly, we want them to be active. We want them to be active learners with their screen and engaged in the content. Because as Erica said, from a behaviourist point of view, they need an emotion for that learning to change and to that transfer of knowledge to happen. So, should I do the questions? Yes, please. Okay. You and your workmates have been invited to a colleague's house for dinner. You don't know the colleague very well, and this is your first time going to their house. How do you feel? You can all shout out a different one, that's fine. We're just going to take the average.
I'm here.
You're okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Intrigued.
Yeah.
Ooh, no, intrigued isn't an option.
You need your glasses.
Always
I'm okay with it.
Did you just choose the one? Oh, you're okay with it.
Oh, so
okay
that was
you were so fun.
Oh, there's interesting.
Sorry, I'm active. Online, turn your mics off mute if you want to have a say in this, otherwise Tessa's going to rule. You know the knock on the front door. Sorry, you knock on the front door, but you have to wait a full 5 minutes before the host opens the door. 5 minutes, long time, yeah. And when they do, you'll realise you're overdressed because they're in a t-shirt and shorts with no shoes.
So the options we've got are, I'm okay with it, I'm enjoying this,
I'm anxious,
this is great, I'm feeling anxious, and
really uncomfortable.
really uncomfortable. So what would most people do?
You've been waiting there 5 minutes and you're overdressed. How do you feel?
I think I'm going to feel, no, I'm going to go, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay?
I'm
How many
okay.
are okay? How many are okay in this room with that? Put your hand up.
Yeah,
engaged.
engaged.
No, just sitting anxious and okay. I was already anxious from the last one.
Okay, shall we go? I'm feeling anxious.
No, I think we've got more okays than that. No, we're okay with that test.
We're okay. We're okay.
Next one. You move into a messy living room where the other guests are, and you're invited to take a seat while your host goes back into the kitchen. The only seat has laundry on it. Interesting that Erica in her ID here never wrote whether it was dirty or clean.
Yeah.
But
So that's unknown.
We'll leave room for the roof for the learner.
Yeah.
go on online, guys. How do you feel about this one? Unmute, give us a spiel.
I'm okay with it.
You're okay with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to sit on the laundry or move it?
I'll slightly move it to the side and shuffle in.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah, same.
Mike, what are you? You're muted. You're
He's
muted.
saying he's okay. I can lip read.
No, okay. So far, so good. It's a bit of an odd beginning to it.
Right, Mike, what are you?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Yep.
Sorry, the chap at the top, whose name I can't see.
It's Vince Ford.
Oh, Vince, hi.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. It's the first time I've been overdressed or anything, and it's quite nice that people have left their laundry around as well. I feel very comfortable.
Okay, so where did we get to with that? Hands up in the room. We are. Okay, we're enjoying this.
Yeah, it's kind of getting a bit random now.
Ready?
Yeah, it's really become hilarious.
Radio. You chat with everyone, but you notice your host is not in the room and the conversation is petering out. How do you feel?
Are we allowed to be anxious in this one?
Yeah, can be whatever you like to be.
We just have the anxious.
We're anxious. Good. Just as everyone is about to start their cold dinner, your host and their partner start bickering and making mean comments about one another disguised as jokes.
This whole scenario is actually based on an actual experience that I had in Boston. Dinner was served at 11 o'clock. We turned up at 5. Dinner was served at 11. It was cold and they started fighting at the table. So,
Oh no.
I was
How
not,
are you feeling now?
I was definitely down in the red.
Were you? You were
Yeah,
feeling uncomfortable?
yeah,
We're
yeah.
uncomfortable on this one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna feel uncomfortable at that point.
Yep, can you take us to the please? Thank you. So the last one is, it's time to go and you say your goodbyes to everyone. Your host waves you off from their seat and doesn't walk you out. I have a feeling about this.
I think I've been enjoying it because I've been glad it's over.
Sounds awful.
This is great.
This is great.
This is done.
Down radio, this is great. So that's how you can be engaged. In the e-learning module, it actually takes you from there. So we use that as the setup for the hospitality campaign. So what we did was we put Toyota into the mindset of what hospitality is about and how it means and how you feel about that. So you've created an emotion with that. And then the rest of your online training, you are now in this mood, so to speak, where you can carry on. We're not going to make you do the whole lot tonight.
It's a really good example of that constructivist theory because there's no right and wrong to it. It is based on your experience alone. So here we are as a group of individuals. We've all had similar responses, but also very different. So the point, as Kim says, is to create that link from your experiences to what I'm now trying to teach you and trying to get you to come on board with me. So the other client that we've got as an example here is Rakaroroa, which is a program run through Like Minds, Like Mind, Changing Mind. It's mental health advocacy from the point of lived experience. So people who've had experiences of some sort of mental distress, who are wanting to go out into their communities, their hapori, and to advocate for mental health awareness. They were really keen to bring in a lot of aspects of Te Ao Māori, bringing in a different viewpoint, so lots of te reo, which can be quite challenging for a lot of people too. So we had to bring that into mind. So the idea is that mental health issues can be quite isolating. And as people with lived experience, myself included, it can be quite challenging to talk about it in a way that is received by others positively, without pity or without making people feel uncomfortable. So a lot of the course is based around that. So I sat with them and I talked to them, and they've got a range of people across New Zealand wanting to do the course. So the course is really impactful in smaller communities where everybody knows each other. And we wanted to bring in the sense that you're not alone, and that's where connectivism comes in. So connectivism is a relatively new piece of andragogy. It's worth understanding that Google's only 22 years old. So the internet itself as a way to communicate and to make connections is still relatively new, but it's very, very powerful. So connectivism is the idea that you and I can be in two different locations across the world doing the same course and coming together in some way, shape or form and building meaning together. So it's using things to create connections to communities. It emphasizes how internet technologies such as web browsers, search engines, wikis, online discussion forums, social networks contribute to new avenues of learning. So for this one, we built in live webinars, which are kōrero sessions. So the learner goes through the modules, constructs their own meaning, has their own time to think, lots of reflective learning in the stuff that I write, lots of time to sit down and actually think about what does this mean to me and how do I want to use it? Do I agree with it? You know, lots of discussion, and then you come together as a group and you exchange your ideas and you build and you grow together. I coupled it with this word down the bottom here, hoitagoji, which I'm very, very passionate about. A lot of my classroom teaching was based on hoitagoji, which is the idea that you and I are equals, and we come to the knowledge together, and you teach me and I teach you, and we construct a new meaning, and we move forward together through the material. And it's amazing what can happen when you just step out of the way as a teacher or a lecturer, and you just let people get on with learning. You learn so much more too. So we combined these two and created an online course where, as I say, the learners go away and they do the little bits individually, and then they come together to create whakanaungatanga, which is a great word. It'd be great if you could get it on So whakanaungatanga is this idea of coming together and creating a community. So what we did was I came up with 5 very simple icebreakers that you filled in individually. So the first one was, how did you get your first name? I was supposed to be a boy. My father was bitterly disappointed when I turned up as a girl. My mother had wanted to call me Melissa, but my grandfather's name was Eric, so I ended up as Erica. Describe yourself in 5 words, only 5 words. So again, you have to stop and think. As each individual records their answers, these answers are collected in an online journal that they can come back to and again do some reflective thinking around. Best piece of advice you were ever given: don't give up your day job. From there, they can then bring those answers into the live kōrero session, and it's an opportunity to build connection with each other. You know, one of the questions was, what's your favourite thing to do on Sunday? So if you and I had a similar connection there, that would start a conversation. We also coupled it with the idea of a responsible buddy, which I may or may not have ripped off South Park with responsibility buddies. So the idea is that you and I are cohorts on the same course. You're my responsible buddy, I'm your responsible buddy. Anytime you're feeling like you're not coping, or you've got questions, or you've got an idea, I'm someone you can come to. I create a safe space for you, you create one for me, and we go through the material together. That makes sense? Am I going too fast? No? Okay.
Sorry, just go back to your point, just is that important? Because I guess people feel more comfortable expressing they're not sure about something, but they're completely aware that what happened can work through that and build that understanding. Whereas they might be more rested to do that.
It's very much based around that idea of whakanaungatanga is you are as strong as your group, but your group's only as strong as your individuals. So if you've got questions and you don't feel like you can ask them, then you're missing out, and so is the group. So by having someone, a peer-to-peer, you've got an opportunity, a much safer opportunity to sit and ask those questions or express those concerns or have those thoughts. And hopefully what you're getting is some positive feedback going, yeah, I thought the same thing, or, you know, have you thought about it this way, which you can then bring to the wider group in that live kōrero. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So NZ Marine and Composites, you've had the most to deal with them.
So they're an ITO, and dealing with students and dealing with apprentices, and an apprentice in a work environment that in an environment where the people around them may not be equipped to be able to train them so well. So we're building some training modules, and train the trainer is not a new concept, but it is for an online environment. So how do you do it where it's just delivered one-to-one? And so we have, can I go say how we tackled it? Yeah, we've tackled it in 2 ways. So we've tackled it by looking at the organisation, so giving the organisation the place where they need to come from and have the mindset that the organisation needs to have to be able to help someone through a learning journey. So what does the learning culture look like for the organisation and how that can be supported. So that's the first part we've tackled it in the corporate point of view. And then we've tackled it from the trainer. So who is the trainer who is dealing directly with the apprentice? What mindset do they need to have? How do they talk to the apprentice? How do they correct them? How do they learn from the process and gain the process as well? So learning is all about learning and unlearning. And
Yeah, yeah. So this particular piece of andragogy is called the zone of proximal development, which means that you take someone from the outside who has little to no knowledge, and you're moving them slowly through the zones to get to you, which as expert. It mirrors very much that master-apprentice relationship. And I've used it both to illustrate how that master apprenticeship relationship works in the actual environment, in the workshop, day to day. And I've also echoed it through the actual design of the modules. So the modules, there's 3 in total, and they start out very, very simple, very easy, and they get harder and harder as they go. So I'm pulling you through those zones. I've also included an extra one down the bottom here, which is tuakanatena, which is actually the Māori equivalent of the same. So that's very much based on an older sibling, younger sibling relationship, and the idea that you learn from watching me. So Tessa, if you can.
At a very basic level, teaching anyone a new skill happens in 3 stages. As your trainee moves through their training with you, discussions can then be scaffolded and their knowledge built upon. Everyone moves through these stages at different rates.
So again, this is a really nice visual representation of that zones of proximal development we're moving through. And the idea of scaffolding is very much a part of pedagogy, the idea of how kids learn. So you start with very basic information, which you then add to once they master that, and then you add to and master that. It's very similar for adults as well, particularly in this kind of environment. So Tessa, if you can press training.
This is the thing that interested me a lot.
Building initial skills. At this stage, the focus is on teaching the core processes, procedures, and skills they need to perform their role.
So from here, what would happen is the person who's learning how to be a good trainer would then work through each of the levels and specific pieces of information that relate to each of those levels as they move through.
This looks a little bit like the first thing that's jumped into my head that I can relate to coming from my industry is the increase in use of AI and how people often need to be supported when they are trying to solve a problem online. And with chatbots and chat, they're almost getting the training, mentoring, supervising, interaction that will help them understand the information in front of them and then what to do next. So that was one thing that stood out as an example in another industry that relates to that learning theory.
And I actually find that really interesting too, and it's something I'd like to talk about a little bit more. Because although you've got those very basic levels, there's parts in between that as well. There's bridges between those levels. And you'll find, particularly in a program like apprenticeship training, you'll have people coming in at the very bottom, and then you'll have others coming in closer to the top. And you as a trainer, you have to be able to assess where they are really, really quickly and meet them at their point of need. And that's where that zone of proximal development actually comes into play. So double loop is a really interesting one. Double loop is often used in leadership training at management level. So if you've ever gone through a management training course, a lot of it is actually, or should really, be based around double loop. So for those of you who can't see, it says, if you treat your learners as if they're lacking, they will be lacking. Start with the belief that they're already at the point you need them to be. So as a classroom teacher, I started my teaching at an all-boys school. So if I walked into a classroom expecting them to be shaved apes, that's exactly how they behave. If I came into the classroom expecting them to be young adults, I was still met with shaped apes, but eventually they became young adults. So it's treating them how you want them to be, approaching them as though they're already at that level. You're just here to make it a little bit easier for them. And that's what we did with this one here, which is probably one of our most popular modules, isn't it?
Oh, this one, yes.
Welcome to the Resilience Practice module. I'm Timothy Jenkins, resilience researcher, coach, and co-creator of this resource to develop your confidence in building your resilience. Now, I say develop your confidence because you're already resilient and you have many, many times built and rebuilt your resiliency. That's how life is. You've experienced tough times and come through them all. Experiences you didn't choose, want, or enjoy. And you adapted.
Thank you, Tessa.
Now that is what.
So Giles's philosophy is very much about the idea that life has taught you to be resilient, otherwise you wouldn't be standing on your feet now. The module approaches it from the same point of view. I'm not going to come in and tell you how to be resilient because I have no experience of your life. I don't know what you've been through. So if I'm telling you that you're stressed out and maybe you should take 5 and go and make yourself a cup of tea, that may or may not be helpful to you. The idea of this module is that you are already resilient. You have those skills. So let's just tweak them a little bit and you take what you feel like you need. So again, it's a very different approach. You as a learner, you've already got this. You're an adult. So I'm not going to treat you like a child. Then we've got interleaving, which is very similar to what is also known in teaching as curating, whereby you're presented with different resources, different opportunities to learn the same material, and you pick and choose as you want. Interleaving is basically the idea that the brain works best by being overloaded. So if you've got an exam and you're cramming for your exams, for example, in a high school example, you might have chemistry, you might have algebra, you might have English. So do 15 minutes on your English, 20 minutes on your algebra, 10 minutes on your chemistry, all within the same hour, and then bounce around them, and your brain's going to go, and it's going to take it all on board a lot faster in a much shorter amount of time. True or false? I don't know. But this is the idea. So the endometriosis, really interesting project, this one. It was designed for 13, 14-year-olds in mixed health classes. So endometriosis is a disorder of the female reproduction system, but you're going to be talking to boys. You're going to be talking to girls who may never experience endometriosis, but sooner or later you're going to meet somebody who has endometriosis. So how do you be supportive of that? How do you understand what it actually means to live with it? And what I did here was I designed a course where the students can come in, they're presented with these options, they decide where they start. They decide what they want to do, what they want to learn first. So they go through each little section, and when they finish the section, they come back and they decide from there where they want to go. So everybody learns the same material. You're learning everything from the practical nuts and bolts of how the female reproduction system works and why it goes haywire and what that's like, through to practical advice on living with it, you know, exercising well, making sure you're resting. How to be supportive of a friend who may have endometriosis and maybe isn't turning up to school, and helping them find support. So there's lots of different ways to approach the same subject, and you can choose your way through. So the example that we've got is around the symptoms, I beg your pardon. So everyone's body is different, which means that not all periods are the same, and if hopefully the rollover works here. We've built in definitions as well, because you've got 30-something kids, 13, 14, different levels of social maturity. You may or may not have kids going, oh, periods, and the teacher's over here trying to deal with that, and you've got others getting on with it. So as one of those kids that was quite happy to be self-directed, I don't want to have to put my hand up every 5 minutes to ask a question about what a word means. I also don't want, as a teacher, kids bouncing out of the module to find out what words mean. So I'm trying to keep everybody in, so here's the definitions. And we turned it into a game. So drag and drop the underwear to escape And you're going to move your way through the symptoms. She better be.
No.
Right?
The interesting thing about that theory is it goes very much against the journey, which is a lot of organisations spend a lot of time designing a journey to make people go through certain steps in a certain way. We're not presenting information like that.
That's right.
There's someone can meet it where they're at and meet and go and get the information that they want. Some experiences with user journeys, making people go through a certain step.
And again, that's perfectly appropriate in some
scenarios. Some that may not be, like in help scenarios, but some will self-service.
It's making this assumption that everyone's coming from the same place.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily right.
Not necessarily right, no, but it's used consistently, which is very interesting. Just doing a time check.
Yes.
We're at 20 past.
That's the last example.
That's awesome. So we can do one more question for one panel question, and then we can open the floor. But if you guys want to have any questions out there. So, okay, I've got one question which I'm expecting a very interesting answer for, which is what tips can you give people that are creating content outside of the industry?
Yes, Sarah. When we were doing run-throughs on this, I said I don't want to answer this question because
But I love the fact that it's controversial. So
Kim and I had very different opinions on this question as well.
yeah, and I just thought it would be good for us as well to get our thinking going as well.
so you want a full-on blown answer.
You start.
Why not? Let's do it.
So my contribution on this is that how can I give tips to somebody outside of my field? Because I'm dealing with the learner every day, where I'm focusing on the learner and I'm focusing on understanding where they're coming from and what's relevant for them in their job. So how can I go out and give someone tips outside my industry? I don't think it's right, and I don't think I can. So for us, it's all because I spend all of my day being focused on where the learner's coming from, on understanding that learner's journey and understanding where they are. Like I said before with e-learning, and what did I say this before in here? I can't remember, I've said it a couple of times today. You know, we're in downtown Auckland here, and the obvious lollyboxes out there are all white ivory towers where people sit at their desks in suits. So the learning resilience, you know, just as relevant to them. That resilience topic is just as relevant for someone from PG Wrightson's who's in a paddock with their gumboots on a farm. But they're not going to relate to the content if I present it to them as with images and tone and texture as if I was sitting in a suit in an ivory tower at a desk. They would squash about someone sitting in a suit. So they won't even get to the content, they won't even get to the learning. And that's the way I feel about that question. Okay. I feel that I can't give advice for something where I'm not in and where I am. Yeah.
What are your views?
I'm the exact opposite.
Of course you are. And you never shared that with me before. You just let me go on.
This is the beauty of a panel. Is that you get shared.
Yeah. Where's the dog at? How comfortable I come.
That was the end of a beautiful career. No, I do. I come from a completely different point of view. I used to, rightly or wrongly, I used to say, if you give me the textbook, I can teach you anything. Because for me, teaching and learning is a reciprocal relationship. So you're not going to learn from me if you don't believe that I can teach you, that I can pull you along and we can build it together. And it's all about that togetherness. So whether you're talking about how to live with endometriosis or how to make somebody feel welcome on your car lot, it doesn't really matter what the content is. It's that delivery and meeting that person at where they're at and where I want you to come with me as opposed to go. So that's why I see it as being different. So the tips that I would say is it's not about you. It's not about me as the teacher. And that was why I got out of teaching, because it's not about me as the teacher. I don't care if you're getting excellences or you're getting achieved. If achieved is as good as you can do, but you feel good about it, then I'm happy. right? Yes, it does me better in my career for you to get excellences, and yes, I can lay out a path that gets you there, but the work by the end of it is not yours. You as the learner, you as the producer, you as the one that comes away and actually has to do something with what I've taught you. You're the important one. I'm just the tool. So that for me is my biggest tip, is it's not about you, it's about where the learner is and where you need that learner to come with you.
So the learning has to be learner-centric.
Absolutely.
The learner is at the centre of all of everything we write, everything we do. That's the whole reason why I can't comment outside of my space.
And that's why I said at the start, but that's why I said at the start, we're not content experts.
Can I be devil's advocate?
Oh my gosh,
There's always one.
No, you both say you're different. What I'm hearing is you both share empathy with the customer.
Yeah, so we need
More
to
like
trust
one
them.
another than different.
Yeah.
You just look at the mountain.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. But how do you do that when you, the question was offering tips outside of that area? And that's where my pushback is, because when you have that focus and you're coming from there, then I can't offer tips for road transport, for instance. You know, what tips can I offer in the road transport industry unless I am absolutely focused on doing the job and understanding that learner in that industry at that time? Because I can do it, but we hone our focus and our zone into that space.
Which is why I said at the start that everything we do is a collaborative relationship between us and the client.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the expert on road safety. They are, but they're also the expert on the learners. I'm the expert on how to get that learner where you need you to go. So we've both got a special set of skills.
Actually, and there might be a missing piece here. So the way we work is that we work with a SME, so we have a subject matter expert. So, I mean, at the moment, we have stuff in here where we're doing ethics, we're doing, what else are we doing? The trainer stuff, we've got
Health and safety, risk management, we're
Interview
doing
skills.
mental health, interview skills, budgeting skills,
tractors.
irrigation systems.
Yeah, so there's, you know, it's a whole gamut of stuff, and our heads are in each of those spaces, but we don't have to know the technical details for those spaces. We work with a subject matter expert who gives us the technical detail, and then we're taking that content and we're focusing on who the learner is in that space. So, and that learner has the traits that Erica's just gone through now, and then how we match those two and bring that together.
How do you get into the headspace?
By remaining curious. I'm a learner. I'm a lifelong learner. I always will be. So I'm constantly challenging and learning and reflect. It's a lot of it is the reflecting. You know, what do I already know? What do I need to know? How am I going to learn? I think by staying curious, you staying in that conversation.
I think I need to share the EMA story. Yeah. So we are doing some work with the EMA at the moment in Rotorua, and so you know, Rotorua COVID hit with hospitality and tourism sectors, and they have an awful lot of unemployment and a lot of people in a lower wage bracket who are feeling absolutely dumped on and homeless and don't know where to go. So we're working with the EMA who are taking them through a retrain program, which is basically building their confidence up and preparing them to be able to try to go into industries that they may not have considered before. So we have just put our resilience, we've just done some interview skills training, so how to prepare for interview and whatnot, and that's been delivered. The first one of our modules that they delivered were the resilience modules. And I was talking to a lady down there who's running it a couple of days ago, and she said, look, am I happy to share this story with you? She said, this woman's just come in to see me, and she has been in she was a courier driver or a truck driver or something before. She said she's a salt of the earth woman, had a really hard life, has been pushed around so many times and is totally feeling like she's done, you know, she's older, she's got kids, she's tired, she's had it. And she came and did the course, and she went, and also has no literacy skills, no digital literacy skills. Sorry, she has literacy skills, but no digital literacy skills. So they spend the time in the classroom and showing them how to get into the learning management system, you know, how to log on and use their email and that. And then when they log on, they give them the e-learning to go and do in their own time. So that she just wanted 3 e-learning modules, of which she had a perfect learning experience through, which is, we'll definitely take a big tick for that because we work really hard on making sure that the whole UX and learner experience is stress-free. streamline. So this woman did it. She got to the end of it, and she said, I get it. I know that it's not about, it's about what's in me. She said, I've had all this tough time that I'm getting so down about, but actually that's my strength. That's the place where I can go to from here. And so she said it gave me the confidence to approach an employee that I worked for a couple of years ago to see if they had anything going, because it was in the aged care industry. And they did, and they got me in for an interview, and I started on Monday, I've got a job from it. And that just made us go, oh my gosh, that's what we do. That's why we do what we do. That's our motivation for getting out of the So I'm actually going down there next Wednesday because we're just doing a budgeting one for that same group. And I want to see the diligence and see how it goes through. That's what gets us over here. It was real cool.
Yeah. Well, I've learned a lot, even though I have picked up some tips by accident. I picked up tips because I've seen some interesting ways you guys have used content to engage with people. With your understanding of how adults learn, and based on my experience with content production, that's really part of the consideration when we're trying to get at the heart of the customer. It's often focused on a problem that a customer is trying to solve rather than meeting that customer where they're at. So I think that there is something there for me to take away. And so I thank you very much for the incredible presentation that you've given us. I didn't know that some of those learning theories even existed. I didn't even know there was such a thing. So I want to do some research on it. So when I'm dealing with customers, clients, and I'm helping them engage with customers, that this is something that we should think about more. I'll take the name learner out and put customer, because they're adults.
That's
and
right.
We're trying to teach them how to press buttons or buy a phone.
You can't take, you can't let an adult do that. They've got to have a